In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But beyond the battlefields, beyond the thunder of bolters and the screams of the dying, there exists a war fought in silence, a war waged in the Imperium itself, where human souls venture into the abyss and return forever changed, if they return at all. This is the story of Astropath Secundus Meridian Vale, a servant of the God Emperor, a beacon in the darkness, a voice crying across the void. This is the story of what she saw, and what saw her back. The Astropathic choir aboard the Eternal Vigil existed in perpetual twilight. The chamber stretched 300 meters beneath the warship's armored hull, a cathedral of psychic resonance where 200 sanctioned psychers maintained the Imperium's most vital lifeline, communication across the stars. Meridian Vale sat in her meditation throne, one of countless identical seats arranged in concentric circles around the primary relay spire. She had occupied this position for 17 standard years, since the day the Black Ships had delivered her to Terra for the soul-binding ceremony. The memory of that day remained vivid, seared into her consciousness like a brand. She remembered the endless procession of psychers, thousands strong, shuffling through the corridors of the Imperial Palace. The air had tasted of incense and fear. The walls hummed with suppression fields that made her teeth ache and her mind feel wrapped in wool. Then came the chamber, the golden throne, the light. I am ready to serve. I am ready to serve. I am ready to... The God Emperor's psychic presence had crashed into her consciousness like a tidal wave of molten gold. For one eternal instant, she had touched the mind of humanity's master, and she had been found acceptable. The price was her sight. The flesh of her eyes had boiled away in that moment of divine contact, leaving only blackened pits where brown eyes had once gazed upon the world. But in return, she had been gifted the sight, the ability to perceive the warp, to send her consciousness across the galaxy, to be the Emperor's messenger in a realm beyond physics and reason. Now, 17 years later, Vale sat in her throne aboard the Eternal Vigil, feeling the familiar pre-transmission ritual begin around her. The choir master's psychic voice resonated through the chamber, a wordless harmonic that aligned 200 minds into a unified instrument. Vale's withered hands gripped the armrests of her throne. The bronze interface ports in her temples hummed as they connected her neural pathways to the ship's astropathic amplifiers. Around her throat, the iron collar of her station grew warm, its inscribed wards glowing faintly in the perpetual gloom. Prepare for transmission. Destination: Segmentum Tempestus, Corinthian Sector, Shrine World, Ophelia 7. Message: Classification: Priority Alpha Obsidian Emperor Protect. Vale released her final conscious breath and let her mind slip free of her body. The transition was never gentle. Reality peeled away like rotting skin, and beneath it lay the truth that most humans mercifully never witnessed. The materium was just a thin membrane stretched over a screaming sea of infinite horror. The warp, the immaterium. Hell. Vale's consciousness manifested as a flickering point of golden light in the roiling chaos of the immaterium. The Emperor's light, the soul-binding's gift, was her shield and sword in this realm where thought and reality were one. The warp around the Eternal Vigil was relatively calm today. If such a word could ever apply to this place, she perceived it as a vast ocean of iridescent colors that should not exist, where up and down held no meaning, and distance was measured in emotion rather than meters. All around her, the other astropaths of the choir manifested as similar points of light, their psychic signatures distinct to her inner sight. Tertius Caney burned bright blue, his thoughts sharp and precise like crystal chimes. Primus Drusilla glowed pearl white, her consciousness ancient and vast as a glacier. Dozens more, each unique, each a tiny candle flame in the infinite dark. Together they began to sing. It was not sound, but pure thought given form. The choir's combined consciousness wove the astropathic message into a sphere of crystallized intent, embedding within it the critical intelligence destined for Ophelia. 7. Fleet movements, xenos migrations, a suspected chaos cult that required the Inquisition's attention. Vale felt her essence stretching, becoming the message itself. This was the art of astropathy, not merely sending thoughts across the void, but becoming the transmission, riding the warp's terrible currents like a ship sailing through a storm-racked sea. The Astronomicon appeared before her inner sight, the Emperor's psychic lighthouse, a blazing pillar of golden light visible across the entire galaxy. It was Terra, Sol, Holy Earth, the source of all guidance, the star by which every astropath navigated the Immaterium's treacherous tides. By the Emperor's will, I carry his word. By the Soul Binding's covenant, I am his instrument. Let no demon bar my path. Let no horror turn me from my duty. She oriented herself using the Astronomicon as her North Star and began her journey toward the distant Segmentum Tempestus. At first, the voyage proceeded as it always did. Vale's consciousness sailed through the warp's upper layers, where the currents were strong but navigable. She passed through regions where emotions crystallized into impossible geometries. A forest of crystallized rage, a lake of frozen sorrow, mountains of joy that sang with colors that had no names. She maintained her focus, reciting the litanies of protection in her mind, feeling the wards worked into her iron collar, burning like cold fire in this realm beyond reality. The message remained intact within her, a seed of pure intent that she would plant in the receiving astropath's mind once she reached Ophelia 7. But then, something changed. A current caught her, stronger than she'd anticipated. The warp around her began to churn with sudden violence, as if something massive had disturbed its depths. Vale tried to correct her trajectory, pulling on the psychic techniques drilled into her through years of training. It wasn't enough. She was being pulled deeper. Down, though such directions meant nothing here. Down into the warp's darker regions, where the veil between reality and nightmare wore thinnest, where the great enemy lurked in all its terrible glory. Choir Master. I'm being pulled off course. I need... The connection to the choir snapped like a broken string. Suddenly, horribly, Vale was alone. Terror flooded through her consciousness, and in the warp, emotion had power. Her fear manifested as icy tendrils wrapping around her golden light, threatening to smother the Emperor's protection. She forced herself to focus, reciting the words that had been beaten into her during her training. The Emperor protects. The Emperor provides. I am his servant and his instrument. I fear no darkness, for I carry his light. I fear no demon, for I bear his mark. I fear no... The litany died in her consciousness as she finally saw what had caught her. It was vast, incomprehensibly vast, a presence in the warp that made the eternal vigil seem like a grain of sand before a mountain. Vale's perception struggled to interpret what she was experiencing, and her mind seized upon metaphors drawn from her lost physical life. She saw it as a whirlpool, a maelstrom of psychic energy, spinning with terrible purpose, drawing everything toward its center. Colors that hurt to perceive swirled in its depths, sickly greens, bruised purples, arterial reds, and, beneath it all, a black so complete it seemed to devour light itself. But worse than the maelstrom was what dwelt within it. Eyes, thousands of eyes, millions opening and closing in the depths of that terrible vortex, each one fixed upon her with an intelligence that was ancient, malevolent, and utterly alien. Emperor, preserve me. What is that? The thing in the maelstrom noticed her attention, and that notice was like being pinned beneath a mountain veil, felt something reaching for her. tendrils of psychic force that sought to pierce her defenses, to unravel her consciousness, to drag her down into that spinning horror and consume what she was. The soul binding's protection flared around her, golden fire erupting from her essence to repel the intrusion. She screamed, not with a voice, for she had no throat here, but with the totality of her being, a psychic shriek of defiance and terror that rippled across the warp like a stone cast into still water. "No! I am sworn to the Emperor. I am bound to his service. You have no claim on me, creature of the primordial darkness." The thing laughed. It was not a sound, but a sensation, like spiders crawling across exposed nerves. It found her resistance amusing, as a cat might find the struggles of a mouse entertaining. Then it spoke. "Little light, little spark, little soul-bound slave. Do you know what you carry? Do you understand the message you bear? No, you are a messenger who cannot read. How delicious, how perfectly ironic." Vale's consciousness recoiled. The demon, for what else could it be, had spoken in her mind, its words bypassing all her defenses to plant themselves directly into her thoughts. Worse, it spoke of her message, the critical intelligence she carried for Ophelia 7. How could it know? How could it perceive what she barely understood herself? Astropaths transmitted messages they could not read, encrypted by the sending authority, meant only for the receiving astropath and their designated recipient. Unless this was a trap. This was always a trap. Clever slave. Yes, your admirals, your captains, your precious fleet commanders. They sent you here to me. Their message was bait, and you are the fish who took it. The maelstrom's pull intensified. Vale felt her golden light flickering, the soul binding's protection straining under the assault. She tried to pull away, to reverse her trajectory and flee back to the eternal vigil, but the demon's grip was absolute. She was being drawn into the maelstrom's heart, and as she descended, she began to see what else dwelt within those spinning depths. Ships. Dozens of them. The psychic signatures of vessels lost in the warp, their Geller fields failed, their crews consumed by demonic incursions. She saw the spirit of Drusus, reported missing 8 months ago. The hammer of righteousness, lost with all hands during the Third Corinthian War. Others she didn't recognize, their psychic echoes fading as they were slowly digested by the thing that had claimed them. And among those ships, she saw them other astropaths, other points of golden light caught in the maelstrom just as she was caught. Some were still fighting, their essence blazing with desperate defiance. Others had already been consumed, their light guttering and dying as the demon peeled away their protections like layers of an onion. Brothers, sisters, we must combine our strength. Together we can... One of the nearest lights responded, and Vale wished it hadn't. The voice that echoed back was wrong, corrupted, shot through with static and malice. "Join us, sister. It doesn't hurt anymore. The Emperor cannot save you here, but we can end your pain. We can show you such sights." The corrupted astropath's light pulsed, and suddenly Vale could see into its thoughts, its memories. She saw an astropath, a man named Cornelius, who had been caught in this same trap 3 weeks ago. She saw his gradual corruption, the diamond whispering to him hour after hour, day after day, peeling away his faith with promises and lies and terrible truths. She saw the moment he broke, the moment he renounced the Emperor and accepted the demon's embrace, the moment his soul was forfeit, and she saw what came after. The things he had been forced to witness, the knowledge that had been burned into his mind, secrets of the warp that no mortal was meant to know, visions of futures and pasts, revelations about the nature of reality that shattered sanity like glass beneath a hammer. Cornelius. "Emperor, forgive me," she struck. Her golden light lanced out like a spear, piercing the corrupted Astropath's essence. It was an act of mercy and necessity. Both Cornelius's consciousness shrieked as Vale's psychic assault tore through him, and then his light went out, the final remnant of his soul released from its torment. The demon in the maelstrom laughed again, delighted by the display. "Oh yes, this one has teeth. This one has fire. You will burn so brightly before the end, little spark. I wonder how long you'll last. Days, weeks? The strong ones are always the most entertaining when they finally break." Vale's consciousness blazed with renewed fury. The demon thought she would break? That she would betray her oaths, her duty, her emperor? She had endured the soul binding, had felt the God Emperor's consciousness burning through her very essence. What was this warp spawn compared to that? She began to fight in earnest. In the Materium, aboard the Eternal Vigil, Meridian Vale's physical body had begun to seize. Blood ran from her nose, her ears, her ruined eye sockets. The iron collar around her throat glowed red-hot, the wards inscribed upon it activating in response to the psychic assault she was enduring. Servitors rushed to her throne, injecting combat stimulants and psychic stabilizers into her withered frame. The choir master himself manifested beside her, his own consciousness reaching into the warp to find his lost astropath. But in the Immaterium, time moved differently. What would be mere seconds in reality could be hours, days, or even years. In the warp's twisted depths, Vale was beyond rescue now. She could only save herself or be lost forever. Vale's consciousness shifted, drawing upon techniques taught in the most secret chambers of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. She was more than a simple messenger. All astropaths were warriors in their own right, trained to defend themselves in the warp's hostile realm. Her golden light blazed brighter, shaping itself into a form drawn from her lost memories. A sword, 3 meters long, burning with the Emperor's holy fire. She swung it at the tendrils reaching for her, and where her blade struck, the demon's essence burned away like morning mist. "I am Astropath Secundus Meridian Vale. I am soul-bound to the master of mankind. I will not yield." The demon's amusement began to curdle into annoyance. The maelstrom churned faster, and more tendrils erupted from its depths, seeking to overwhelm her through sheer numbers. Vale danced among them, her psychic blade carving through corrupted warp stuff, her movements guided by instinct and 17 years of trained discipline. But she was tiring. Each strike cost her energy, and energy in the warp was willpower, focus, faith. The demon was infinite, a fragment of the great enemy that had plagued humanity since before the fall. She was finite, human, mortal. She could not win. She could only endure. "You fight well, little spark, but you begin to understand, don't you? This is not a battle you can win. Eventually, you will falter. Eventually, you will fall. Why delay the inevitable? Why suffer needlessly?" The demon's words carried a psychic weight that pressed against her consciousness like a physical force. Vale felt doubt creeping into her thoughts, insidious and cold. She was alone, cut off from the choir, trapped in the warp's depths with a creature of impossible power. What chance did she have? What hope was there for survival? The Emperor protects. But does he? Does he see me here? Does he even know I'm lost? The doubt crystallized into terror, and terror opened cracks in her defenses. The demon's tendrils found those cracks and began to pry, widening them, seeking entry into her very soul. Vale screamed again, but this time the scream carried a note of despair. She felt the demon's presence seeping into her consciousness like poison, felt it touching her memories, her thoughts, her sense of self. It showed her visions, her past, but twisted, corrupted. She saw her parents selling her to the black ships, not out of duty to the Emperor, but for the monetary reward. She saw her instructors at the Scholastica Sicana, their supposed devotion revealed as merely a means to power. She saw the soul-binding ceremony itself, and the demon whispered a terrible possibility. What if the Emperor was nothing but a rotting corpse on a golden throne? What if the light she had touched was merely the psychic death scream of a being millennia dead? No, that's not true. I felt him. I know what I felt. Do you? Or did you feel what you wanted to feel? What you needed to feel to justify the sacrifice of your eyes, your freedom, your life? The doubt was a cancer now, spreading through her consciousness. Veil's golden light flickered, dimming as her faith wavered. The demon pressed its advantage, showing her more visions. She saw the Imperium as it truly was, a rotting edifice of cruelty and oppression, where trillions suffered in darkness while the powerful fed on their misery. She saw the truth behind the Imperial Creed, the lies and manipulations that kept humanity enslaved to a system that ground souls into dust. She saw worlds burning, populations culled for the crime of mutation, children taken from their families and brutalized into becoming weapons. The Inquisition's casual cruelties, justified by necessity but indistinguishable from evil. This is what you serve, little spark. This is what your God-Emperor built, an empire of suffering without end. You call us demons, call us evil, but we offer release. We offer truth. We offer Veil's blade wavered, its light guttering like a candle in the wind. The demon's words cut deeper than any physical weapon could because they carried a kernel of truth within the lie. She had seen the Imperium's darkness. She knew what horrors were committed in the Emperor's name, but she had also seen the alternative. You speak of freedom. But I have been inside your realm. I have seen what you offer. Your freedom is slavery to hunger. Your truth is insanity. Your release is damnation. She remembered her training, the lessons taught by the blind masters of the Scholastica Psychana. Yes, the Imperium was cruel. Yes, it was vast and uncaring and often monstrous, but it was also humanity's shield against the infinite horror of the warp. Every ship that sailed the void needed Geller fields to keep the demons at bay. Every world required Astropaths to communicate across the stars, to coordinate defenses, to maintain the fragile web of connection that kept humanity from fragmenting into isolated pockets of helpless prey. The Imperium was imperfect, brutal, often evil. But it was necessary, and that necessity gave her purpose. I serve the Imperium because I must, because someone must, because without servants like me, humanity would fall into the darkness you represent. My suffering has meaning, my sacrifice has purpose, and that you cannot take from me. Her blade blazed back to full strength, brighter than before, and she swung it in a great arc that carved through a dozen tendrils at once. The demon recoiled, its amusement replaced by genuine surprise. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. Perhaps you are worthy of a longer game. The maelstrom's pull suddenly ceased. Veil found herself floating free in the warp, no longer being dragged into the demon's maw. For one blessed moment she thought she might have won, might have driven the creature back through sheer force of will. Then she understood. The demon hadn't retreated. It had simply changed tactics. The visions began in earnest. But that is a tale for another time. For now, know this. Astropath Meridian Veil fought in the depths of the warp, alone and afraid, but unbroken. The demon had shown her the Imperium's darkness, had tried to corrupt her with doubt and despair, but it had made a critical error. It had assumed that Veil served out of ignorance, that knowledge of the Imperium's flaws would shatter her faith. Instead, it had only made her more dangerous. For now she fought not as a naive believer, but as someone who understood the stakes. Who knew that the choice was not between good and evil, but between survival and extinction? The demon had made her stronger, and it was about to discover just how terrible a mistake that was. The warp around Vale shifted, reality restructuring itself according to the demon's will. The maelstrom remained, but now something emerged from its depths, a corridor of impossible geometry stretching into infinity in all directions. At once, its walls were not made of any substance Vale could name. They shimmered and writhed, somewhere between solid matter and living thought, pulsing with colors that existed only in nightmares. Set into these walls at regular intervals were windows, thousands of them, millions, each one a portal into a different moment, a different truth. Vale's consciousness drifted forward, drawn by a compulsion she could not resist. Her golden blade flickered and died, useless here. This was not a battle she could fight with weapons. The demon's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, no longer mocking but coldly factual. You want meaning? You want purpose? Let me show you the truth of your service, little spark. Let me show you exactly what your messages have wrought across the Imperium you serve so faithfully. I know my duty has costs. All war has costs. I accept. Accept? Oh no, child. You don't accept what you don't understand. But you will. You will understand everything. Vale approached the first window against her will. She tried to look away, tried to close eyes she no longer possessed, but the demon's power held her consciousness fixed. She could only watch. The scene showed a world she recognized immediately. Keldon Prime, an industrial hive world in the Segmentum Obscurus. She had transmitted a message to this world 3 years ago, a priority alert about suspected genestealer infiltration discovered in the Underhive's 7th district. The window showed the aftermath of her message. Emperor, preserve me. What have I done? Keldon Prime burned. Not from xenos corruption, but from the Inquisition's response to her warning. The entire world had been subjected to exterminatus, virus bombs followed by cyclonic torpedoes, ensuring nothing could survive. She watched orbital strikes lance down from the heavens like the Emperor's own judgment, watched atmospheric fire consume continents, watched the oceans boil away into steam. And through the demon's power she saw more, saw individuals in their final moments. A family in Hive Primus, level 47, sector 89. They were having dinner when the warning sirens began. The father, a manufacturing worker named Gaius, tried to comfort his children even as he knew there was nowhere to run. The mother, Helena, held their infant son and whispered prayers to the Emperor. The daughter, barely 6 years old, asked why the sky was burning. Vale watched them die, watched the virus bombs reduce them to puddles of organic sludge, watched their final moments of terror and pain. And they were just 4 souls among billions. 4.3 billion humans, to be precise. 4.3 billion loyal servants of your corpse emperor, purged because of words you carried. The High Inquisitor who ordered the exterminatus received your message and acted within 6 hours. So efficient, so thorough. Tell me, did their deaths have meaning? Did their suffering have purpose? The genestealer cult would have spread, would have corrupted the entire world. The Tyranids would have followed. If we hadn't acted, if we had hesitated. If. Oh, but let me show you something truly delicious, little spark. The window rippled, showing a different scene. The same world, the same moment, but different. A timeline that never was, or perhaps one that existed in some parallel fold of reality. In this vision, no message was sent. The genestealer cult was discovered 3 months later by local Arbites during a routine Hab-block inspection. They called in the PDF. The cult numbered only 300 individuals, contained in a single District A surgical military operation, eliminated them in 2 weeks with minimal civilian casualties. Keldon Prime survived. Those 4.3 billion souls lived, grew old, had children, continued serving the Imperium. That's a lie, a deception. You're showing me false possibilities to break me. The cult would have spread too quickly for conventional forces to contain. Is it a lie, or is it merely another truth? In the warp, all timelines exist simultaneously. Little spark past, present, future, what was and what might have been, all real, all happening at once. This DI'd happen in a reality where your message arrived 3 months late, but not in your reality. In your reality, you were efficient, you were dutiful. You delivered your message with perfect clarity and timing, and 4,300,000,000 souls burned for your diligence. The demon's words carried a weight of truth that pressed against Vale's consciousness like a physical force. She wanted to deny it, to call it lies and manipulation, but she could feel the reality of what she was seeing. The warp did not lie. It showed truth, albeit truth twisted and selected to serve its purposes. No, I did my duty. The Inquisition made the choice, not me. I only carried the message. The responsibility is theirs. Ah, yes, the eternal defense of the servant. I was only following orders. How many atrocities have been committed behind that shield, I wonder? But let us not argue philosophy. Let me show you more, so much more. The corridor forced Vale forward, her consciousness unable to resist its pull. The second window loomed before her, and she recognized what it would show even before the scene materialized: the Hammer of Righteousness. One of the ships she had seen trapped in the Maelstrom's depths, its crew already consumed by the demon's hunger. She knew this vessel because she had transmitted the orders that sent it to its doom 7 months ago. She had carried a priority repositioning command during the Third Corinthian War. The Hammer of Righteousness was to be diverted from its patrol route to respond to what Imperial intelligence believed was a critical Ork incursion in the Hadrian cluster. The window showed the truth. There had been no Ork incursion. The intelligence was a phantom, perhaps a sensor ghost, perhaps enemy misinformation, perhaps simple human error in the vast and imperfect machinery of the Imperial war effort. The ship was diverted into an unstable warp route. The navigator protested, but orders were orders. They entered the warp. The Gelor field failed 36 hours into transit. Vale watched, was forced to watch, as the demons poured through the vessel's hull like water through a shattered dam. She saw the crew's descent into madness and horror, their reality dissolving as the warp's infinite malevolence flooded through their ship. She saw Captain Miroslav, a man she had once met during a ship transfer, a man with a wife and 3 daughters on Cypra Mundi. She watched him torn apart by warp entities while his consciousness remained intact, forced to experience every instant of his dismemberment across subjective centuries of suffering. She saw Navigator Estelle, her third eye burst open by the unfiltered sight of the warp, her sanity shredding like paper in a storm, as she perceived truths that mortals were never meant to know. She saw 3,000 crew, every single one, die in ways that transcended physical death. Their souls consumed, their essences torn apart and reconstituted as playthings for entities that existed beyond morality, beyond mercy, beyond anything human. 3,000 souls, lost because you carried a message based on faulty intelligence. Of course you didn't know the intelligence was faulty. How could you? You're just the messenger. You don't question. You don't verify. You simply obey. Stop this. Stop this. I know war has casualties. I know that mistakes happen. This proves nothing except that the galaxy is cruel. Oh, but we're only beginning. Little spark, I have so many more windows to show you. So many more messages you've carried. So many more consequences you've never witnessed. The third window showed the agri-world Thessia 4 Vale had transmitted a tithe increase order to this world 18 months ago. The Imperium needed more food to feed the Guard regiments fighting in the Damocles Gulf. The tithe was increased by 40%. The window showed the result: mass starvation. The world's population couldn't meet both the tithe and their own needs. Riots erupted. The Adeptus Astartes cracked down with lethal force. In the chaos, agricultural production collapsed further, creating a death spiral of famine and violence. Vale watched children with distended bellies dying in the streets, watched parents making impossible choices about which of their offspring to feed, watched entire villages emptying as the population fled into the wilderness, where most died of exposure or were preyed upon by the world's native predators. 200 million dead. Not from enemy action, not from xenos invasion, not from heresy, but from hunger. From a simple administrative message she had carried without question, very consequence that rippled out from your dutiful service. Here, watch this one. The fourth window showed a jungle world called Verdantia. Vale had transmitted recruitment orders to this world 5 years ago. The Guard needed fresh troops for the Malediction campaign. Verdantia was to provide 5 regiments, 50,000 men and women. The Administratum's census data was 12 years out of date. The world's population had been devastated by a plague during that time. They couldn't raise 50,000 troops without crippling their entire civilization. But orders were orders. She watched them try, watched as the able-bodied were conscripted, leaving behind only the elderly, the infirm, and children watched as Verdantia's infrastructure collapsed without the workers to maintain it. Watched as the world descended into anarchy, becoming a failed state that eventually had to be abandoned, its remaining population evacuated as refugees. An entire world broken by her message. Please, no more. I understand. I understand what you're trying to show me. Do you? I don't think you do. Not yet. Let me make it perfectly clear. The windows began to appear faster now, surrounding Vale's consciousness in a sphere of countless scenes. She saw them all simultaneously, each one a hammer blow to her psyche. A battle group redirected based on her transmission, arriving too late to save a world from dark Eldar raiders, 2 billion enslaved, taken into Komara's nightmare depths. A quarantine order she had carried, sealing a hive world against a supposed plague outbreak. The plague turned out to be a false alarm, but the quarantine remained for 6 months due to bureaucratic inertia. 12 million dead from preventable causes because medical supplies couldn't enter the system, an intelligence report about suspected heresy. The planet subjected to brutal inquisitorial investigation. The heresy was real, a cult of 20 individuals. The Inquisition's purges killed 200,000 before they were satisfied the taint was cleansed. A fleet repositioning order. Ships moved from one sector to another. The sector they left was attacked by chaos forces 3 weeks later. Without the fleet, the defenses crumbled. 8 worlds fell, on and on and on, an endless parade of consequences, each one stemming from messages she had faithfully carried. Billions dead, trillions suffering, entire worlds broken or lost, all because she had done her duty without question, without hesitation, without understanding the weight of, now do you see? Now do you understand? You are not a servant of the Emperor, little Spark. You are a weapon of mass destruction. Every message you carry has the potential to end worlds, to kill billions, and you do it without thought, without question, without accountability. You are the Imperium's perfect tool, efficient, obedient, and utterly blind to the consequences of your actions. Vale's consciousness collapsed inward, her golden light dimming to barely a flicker. The weight of what she had witnessed pressed down upon her like a mountain of corpses. Each death, each tragedy, each broken world, they all bore her fingerprints. She tried to cling to her training, to the justifications she had been taught. The Imperium must be maintained. Humanity must survive. Individual suffering was meaningless against the cosmic scale of survival, but the demon had shown her something her training had never addressed. What if her efficiency, her dutiful service caused more suffering than necessary? What if questioning, hesitating, thinking for herself might have saved lives? I only wanted to serve. I gave everything. My eyes, my freedom, my life. I endured the soul-binding's agony because I believed I was protecting humanity. And how many of humanity did you kill in that protection, I wonder? Shall we count? I have perfect records. Every soul that died as a consequence of your messages. Would you like to know the number? No. 17,342,871,406. That is your tally, little spark. That is the price of your faithful service. Tell me, does that number have meaning? Does that suffering have purpose? The number was so vast as to be meaningless. Vale's human mind couldn't grasp 17 billion individual deaths. They became a statistic, an abstraction. And yet, she had seen individuals in those windows, real people, with names and families and hopes and fears. Gaius and Helena and their unnamed children on Keldon Prime, Captain Miroslav with his 3 daughters, the starving children on Thessia 4. Each one real, each one dead because of her. Her consciousness began to fragment, cracks appearing in the golden light of her soul binding. The demon sensed her breaking and pressed harder, its voice becoming almost gentle, almost kind. You've suffered enough, little spark. You've carried this burden for so long. Let me take it from you. Let me show you peace. All you have to do is let go. Release your faith in the Corpse Emperor. Accept that your service was meaningless, your sacrifice wasted. Stop fighting. Stop hurting. Just let go. And in that moment, Vale wanted to. The temptation was overwhelming. To surrender, to stop carrying this terrible weight, to simply dissolve into the warp and end the pain of consciousness. She felt her essence beginning to unravel, the soul binding's protection cracking like ice beneath a hammer. The demon's presence surrounded her, ready to consume what remained of her identity. In the Materium aboard the Eternal Vigil, her physical body was dying. Her heart had stopped twice, restarted each time by servitor ministrations. The choir master's consciousness battered against the barrier the demon had erected, unable to reach his lost Astropath. The ship's medici gave her minutes at best. In the warp, Vale's golden light flickered on the edge of extinction. And then something changed. It started as a memory, surfacing through the despair. Not a grand memory, not a moment of triumph or glory, but something small, something human. She remembered her 7th day at the Scholastica Sicana on Terra. She had been 10 years old, newly arrived on the black ships, terrified and alone. The training was brutal, the instructors merciless, the suppression collars they made her wear gave her constant headaches. She had broken down crying in her cell, certain she would die in this place, certain she would never see her home or family again. An older student had found her a girl named Cassandra, 14 years old, already marked for the soul binding. Cassandra had sat with her in that dark cell and simply held her while she cried. No words of comfort, no false promises, just presence, just compassion. It's okay to be scared. We're all scared. But you're not alone. You'll never be alone. We're all in this together, every Astropath, every psyker who serves. We carry each other when we can't carry ourselves. The memory expanded, Vale remembered others. Instructor Magnus, harsh and demanding, but who had stayed with her for 3 days straight when she nearly burned out during a training exercise, guiding her back from the edge of psychic death, Navigator Estelle. Yes, the same Estelle who had died aboard the Hammer of Righteousness, who had shared a meal with Vale once and talked about her dreams for the future. Her hopes that one day the Imperium might find a way to make the warp less dangerous for all of them, Captain Miroslav, who had thanked her personally after she delivered an urgent message that saved his ship from a traitor's ambush, and who had shown her holes of his daughter's people. Flawed, struggling, suffering people, trying to do good in an uncaring universe, just like her. You showed me the deaths, but you didn't show me the lives saved. You didn't show me the worlds that survived because of my messages, the ships that avoided ambushes, the fleets that arrived in time, the warnings that prevented disasters. Does that matter? Does the good outweigh the bad? Can you calculate such a thing? Can you measure 17 billion deaths against however many lives you think you saved? No, I can't calculate it. I'm not a god. I'm not omniscient. I can't see all the consequences of my actions across time and space, and neither can you. You only showed me what served your purpose. You showed me selected truths to break me, the demon hissed, its voice losing its false gentleness. The truths I showed you are real. Those people died. Those worlds burned. You cannot deny your guilt. I don't deny it. Yes, I carry guilt. Yes, my messages have had terrible consequences. But that's the nature of existence in this galaxy. Every choice, every action, every message carried or not carried has consequences. The question isn't whether I'm guilty, it's whether I accept. Her golden light blazed back to full strength, brighter than before, and in that light, the corridor, she remembered something else now. A lesson from the soul-binding ceremony itself. A whisper from the Emperor's consciousness in that moment of agonizing contact. Not words, but understanding. The Emperor himself had made mistakes, had ordered horrors, had created systems that ground trillions into dust. He knew the cost of his Imperium. He had always known. And he carried that weight not because he was certain he was right, but because someone had to carry it, because the alternative was extinction. I serve the Imperium not because it's good. I serve because someone must. I carry messages not because I know they're right. I carry them because the alternative is silence, isolation, and death. And yes, I will make mistakes. I will carry messages that lead to tragedy. But I will also carry messages that save lives. And I will keep doing it, keep trying, keep serving, because that is what it means to be human, to try despite uncertainty, to act despite fear, to serve despite guilt. The demon's corridor shattered like glass, and Vale found herself back in the maelstrom, surrounded by the spinning vortex of corrupted psychic energy. But now she saw it differently, not as a trap, but as a challenge. Not as certain doom, but as an obstacle to overcome. You dare reject my gifts. I showed you truth. I showed you your guilt. How can you still serve that rotting corpse after everything you've seen? Because I'm not serving a corpse, I'm serving an idea. The idea that humanity can endure, that we can fight on despite the darkness, that our flaws don't define us, our choices do, and I choose to keep fighting. Her psychic blade reformed in her consciousness, but it was different now. No longer a simple sword of golden light, it was complex, multifaceted, bearing the weight of everything she had learned. It was guilt and purpose, doubt and faith, despair and hope, all forged together into something stronger than any single emotion. She swung the blade at the maelstrom's edge, and where it struck, the demon's construction began to unravel. The maelstrom shrieked, its millions of eyes focusing on her with inhuman fury. If I cannot corrupt you, I will destroy you. You will die here, little spark, and your soul will feed me for 10,000 years. The demon struck with everything it had, tendrils of corrupted warp stuff lashed out by the thousands, each one carrying enough psychic force to shatter a lesser mind. The other trapped astropaths in the maelstrom were drawn into the assault, their corrupted consciousness turned into weapons against her. Veil danced among the attacks, her blade carving through demon flesh and corrupted souls alike. Each strike was an act of mercy for the fallen Astropaths, releasing them from their torment. Each movement was a prayer, a reaffirmation of purpose. But she was still one against a fragment of infinity. The demon was vast beyond measure, and even at her strongest, she was merely human. She couldn't win, but she didn't need to win. She just needed to escape. The Astronomicon. Find the Astronomicon. Through the chaos of the battle, through the swirling madness of the maelstrom, Veil reached out with her consciousness, searching for that beacon of golden light that guided all astropaths through the warp there, distant, partially obscured by the demon's presence, but there nonetheless. The Emperor's psychic lighthouse, burning across the galaxy with the power of 10,000 sacrificed psychers. Every day, another terrible cost, another weight of guilt, but also proof that she was not alone in her sacrifice. If you can hear me, Master of Mankind, I could use some help right now. She didn't expect an answer. The Emperor had not spoken directly to anyone in 10,000 years. He was locked in eternal battle with the Chaos Gods, barely maintaining the Astronomicon, unable to spare attention for one struggling astropath. But sometimes faith itself was enough. Veil surged toward the Astronomicon, using every technique she had ever learned, burning through her psychic reserves with reckless abandon. The demon's tendrils grabbed at her, slowing her, pulling her back. She cut them away again and again, her blade moving faster than thought. You cannot escape. I am eternal. I am infinite. You are nothing. Nothing. I am Astropath Secundus Meridian Veil. I am soul-bound to the Master of Mankind. I am a servant of the Imperium. I am flawed, guilty, and broken. And I am human. She reached the edge of the maelstrom and threw herself toward the Astronomicon with everything she had left. The demon's final shriek of rage followed her, but it could not leave its vortex, could not pursue beyond its domain. The light of the Astronomicon grew brighter. Closer, Veil's consciousness fragmented from the strain, pieces of her identity sloughing away like burning paper. She was dying, her essence unable to sustain this level of exertion, but she would die free, die faithful, die with purpose. Veil's consciousness slammed back into her physical body with enough force to stop her heart. For the third time, the servitors restarted it with a shock of electricity. She gasped, her ruined eye sockets weeping bloody tears, her withered frame convulsing in the meditation throne. The choir master's presence filled her mind, his relief palpable. Veil, Emperor's mercy, we thought you lost. What happened? Where did you go? She tried to speak, to explain, but her vocal cords had atrophied from 17 years of disuse. Instead, she transmitted her response telepathically, her thoughts raw and exhausted. Demonic. Ambush. Maelstrom. Trapped. It tried to break me, showed me things. Terrible the Emperor protects, but he also demands. Master, the message I was carrying. I never. The choir master's consciousness rippled with concern, but also with grim understanding. I will inform the command staff. They will investigate how the enemy learned of our transmission. But Veil, you need to rest, recover. What you endured. No, send me back. I need to go back. That's madness. You nearly died. Your physical body is failing. Your psychic reserves are depleted. You need weeks of recovery before you can safely enter the warp again. Then I'll go without safety. Master, I learned something in that maelstrom, something important. I saw the consequences of my messages, the weight of what we do. And I realized I can't let that stop me. The work is too important. The Imperium needs us too badly. I have to keep going. We all do. The choir master was silent for a long moment, his consciousness considering her words. What did the demon show you, Veil? What did it do to you in there? It showed me truth. It showed me that every message I carry has consequences I can never fully understand. It showed me that I am responsible for deaths, suffering, tragedy. It tried to break, and I accepted it. All of it. The guilt, the uncertainty, the weight. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is giving up. And I will never do that. The choir master's presence radiated something that might have been pride, or perhaps sorrow, or perhaps both. Then rest for now, sister. When you are strong enough, we will send you back into the warp, back into the darkness, because that is what we do. That is what we are. Servants of the Imperium. 3 weeks later, Astropath Secundus Meridian Vale sat once more in her meditation throne. Her body had recovered, though she bore new scars, psychic wounds that would never fully heal. The Medici had declared her fit for duty, though several had recommended she be retired to administrative work. She had refused. Around her, the astropathic choir prepared for another transmission. 200 souls, linked in purpose, ready to cast their consciousness into the warp once more. Vale felt their presence, felt the comfort of not being alone, and drew strength from it. The destination this time was Cadia, the fortress world that stood as humanity's shield against the Eye of Terror. The message was critical fleet disposition information, necessary for the ongoing defense of the Cadian Gate. Vale knew that this message, like all messages, would have consequences. Ships would move, battles would be fought, people would live and die based on the information she carried, and she had no way of knowing if those consequences would be good or bad. No way of calculating the cost versus the benefit. No way of ensuring she was making the right choice. But she would carry the message anyway, because that was her duty, her choice, her purpose. Prepare for transmission. Emperor protect. Vale released her final conscious breath and let her mind slip free of her body. The transition was still violent, still painful, but now she faced it without fear. She had been to the abyss and returned. She had confronted the worst the warp could show her and survived. The Immaterium opened before her, vast and terrible and beautiful in its horror. The Astronomicon blazed in the distance, the Emperor's guiding light across the darkness. Vale oriented herself and began her journey toward Cadia. As she sailed through the warp's upper layers, she thought about the demon in the maelstrom, still trapped in its vortex, still hunting for astropaths to corrupt and consume. She thought about the windows it had shown her, the consequences of her service. And she thought about something the demon had never understood. Humans don't serve because they're perfect. They serve because they're imperfect, but they try anyway. I carry 17 billion deaths in my wake, and I will carry more before I die. This is the price of service in the Imperium. This is the cost of survival in a galaxy that wants us dead. But I also carry hope. Every message delivered is a thread in the web that binds humanity together. Every transmission is proof that we have not given up, that we still fight, that we endure. I am flawed. I am guilty, I am broken, and I am exactly what the Imperium needs. The warp churned around her as she traveled, but Vale moved through it with purpose and determination. Somewhere out there, the demon waited. Somewhere, other horrors lurked in the darkness, waiting for the unwary. But she was no longer unwary. She was no longer innocent. She knew the cost of what she did, and she paid it willingly. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, someone has to carry the messages. Someone has to maintain the connections that keep humanity from fragmenting into isolated pockets of prey. Someone has to be the voice crying across the void, and Meridian Vale had chosen to be that someone with full knowledge of what it meant. This is the truth of the Astropaths, not heroes, not villains, but humans doing an impossible job in an impossible galaxy. They carry guilt and hope in equal measure. They serve an Imperium that is both humanity's salvation and its damnation. And they do it anyway. Because someone must. Because the alternative is worse. Because humanity, for all its flaws, deserves to survive. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But there are also messengers. There are also those who refuse to be broken. There are also those who choose again and again to carry the light into the darkness, knowing they can never defeat it, but refusing to surrender to it. Astropath Secundus Meridian Veil is one of those. One spark among billions, carrying her messages across the stars, bearing her guilt without complaint, serving without certainty. Human, flawed, unbroken.